Author of the new book Soundtracks, John Acuff, says this: "One of the greatest mistakes you can make in life is assuming all your thoughts are true." I'll say it again. One of the greatest mistakes you can make in life is assuming all your thoughts are true. What soundtrack do you play in your head? We all have songs that bring us back to a certain time period in our lives. But what phrases are on repeat in your head are your soundtrack? Psychologists have found that the messages in our heads tend to be negative if left to our own devices. We assume that because the thought popped into our minds that it's true. But what is that based on? It's so easy for me to beat myself up for not saying something well when I meet someone new, or not speaking up in a meeting, or saying something awkward around a new set of friends. The first thought in my head is, "Ugh, what is wrong with me? I'm so clueless. I'm incompetent." We don't often say, "I did the best I could today." Or, "It's okay to be in new situations. I learned what didn't work so that I can plan differently next time." We don't often say that type of constructive feedback to ourselves unless we focus on it intentionally. What if you said, "I am competent. I know my strengths and my limitations, and I am not afraid of challenges." Or if we said, "I am not alone. God is with me." Many of us go through life with a distorted identity, and most often it comes out as shame, or it comes out as narcissism or grandiosity. But both shame and narcissism are distortions of our true identity. We cross paths every day with people whose soundtrack says, "I am inferior, I am incapable, I don't deserve respect." Maybe you feel that way too, and you have no idea that there is an army of other people out there who feel the same way as you do. Or maybe you are so influenced by culture, like all of us, where our social media and the algorithms that control what we see don't help us. They all bombard us with messages and images of how we don't measure up. There are always social influencers who are smarter, better looking, thinner, and more successful. Or our identity can get distorted in the other direction, and we can hear the soundtrack of grandiosity or narcissism. That soundtrack goes like this: "I deserve whatever I want. I am better than everyone else. People exist to serve me. How dare someone tell me no to something that I want?" People who have this soundtrack feel shame too, but it gets pushed outwards towards others. Everything is other people's fault. It's never my fault, and everyone owes me. Our soundtracks get shaped by our life experiences. Sometimes it's shaped by mistakes we've made and have to live with. Other times, it's what's happened to us or what people have told us from a young age. Certain soundtracks can keep us stuck. Brené Brown says that shame does not serve a healthy purpose in our lives. She says it's different than guilt, which can motivate us to right a wrong. Brené Brown says that shame is the painful feeling or experience of believing that we are flawed and therefore unworthy of love or belonging. It is different than guilt that prompts us to say, "I did something bad." With guilt, we realize that we made a bad decision, we did a bad action, but that we can ask for forgiveness, we can be held accountable, and we can make amends. Guilt says, "I did a bad thing." Shame says, "I am a bad person." There's a huge difference there. Shame keeps you stuck in a low place, or it comes out as narcissism and keeps you stuck in a place of entitlement and blaming. Neither place is a healthy place to live. Neither place is informed by who God says you are. Ephesians gives us a new soundtrack. We have been spending a lot of time in this ancient letter to people who lived in Ephesus after the time of Jesus. The Apostle Paul wrote this letter to people he cared for deeply. In his letter, he let them know that he was praying for them. And he didn't just say the generic, "I'm praying for you." He told them exactly what he was praying for. He was giving them a new soundtrack to listen to. By telling them how he was talking to God on their behalf, he was hoping the words go from the page to their hearts and minds. He prays for three things. First, he prays that they would know God. In Ephesians 1:17, he prays that God would give them spiritual wisdom and insight so that they may grow in their knowledge of God. Knowing God more deeply gives you a better idea of who you are. Second, Paul prays that they would know hope. In Ephesians 1:18, he prays that the eyes of their hearts would be enlightened so that they might know the hope of their calling. Hope in the Christian sense means looking forward to God's promises and knowing that they will happen. It is anticipation of what we already know to be true. If you know that God has a hopeful story for you, your soundtrack doesn't have to include thoughts that you are a failure or that you are better than everyone else. Third, Paul prays that these people would know God's power. In Ephesians 1:19, he prays that they would know the power of God, the same power that raised Jesus from the dead. If you lean on God's power, you don't need to have a distorted view of yourself, either thinking you are worthless or thinking that your power alone will save you. The middle ground is called competence, knowing your capabilities and your limitations. Paul wants you to know God. He wants you to know hope. He wants you to know the power of God in your life. These things can change your soundtrack. But this message of God's power isn't a self-improvement plan. It's a rebirth into God's family. It means you live your life in the presence of God. You say, "I am competent. I am loved. I am claimed by God. I know my limits. God is my strength." One of my seminary professors says that every time that we take a shower, we should remember our baptism, to remember that we have been claimed by God. It's a daily thing. Baptism is a lifelong practice that can reinforce a soundtrack that helps us live into this new birth. My prayer for you is the prayer that Paul prayed long ago. God, I pray that you would give the listener of this message a spirit of wisdom and revelation so that they may know you better, and that the eyes of their heart would be enlightened so that they may know the hope of your calling, the riches of your glorious inheritance, and your great power. Amen.